Evelyn Walker realized her own children would abandon her the night they gathered to celebrate her 80th birthday, because one sentence at that table would expose a betrayal deeper than anything she had ever imagined. It wasn't the kind of birthday revelation anyone deserved, but life rarely asked permission before breaking a heart. The Italian restaurant on the west side of Cleveland, Ohio, was packed with families, couples, and teenagers celebrating early weekend freedom. Warm yellow lights hung low above the tables, making the red-checkered tablecloths glow with an almost nostalgic charm. But nostalgia didn't comfort Evelyn. In fact, it stung. The smell of garlic bread and marinara sauce brought memories she wasn't sure she wanted anymore. Memories of louder, happier dinners when her children were young and she wasn't an afterthought. Her 3 adult children sat with her, though "with her" felt like an overstatement. Melissa, the eldest, wore a steel gray blazer that matched her stiff posture. She checked her smartwatch every few minutes, frowning whenever it buzzed. Daniel scrolled through emails on his phone, the glow reflecting off the lenses of his designer glasses, and Jenna kept adjusting her hair and lip gloss for photos, making sure the candlelight hit her face just right while subtly angling the camera to crop out her mother's wrinkles. The waiter arrived balancing a cake with too many candles. 80 sparks of life Evelyn could feel slipping from her fingers. "Happy birthday, Mom!" The frosting read in looping blue letters that looked cheerful and empty at the same time. As the sparkler hissed on top, everyone raised their phones. Screens lit up, flashlights flickered, and for a moment it looked less like a celebration and more like a staged documentary about a family pretending everything was fine. Evelyn leaned in to blow out the candles, feeling the heat warm her cheeks. She didn't close her eyes. She didn't wish for anything. She simply breathed out, watching the flames vanish and leave the room a little colder. Have you ever ignored a warning your own heart whispered to you? Evelyn had been ignoring them for months, maybe years, but tonight they screamed. As she straightened, Jenna snapped a burst of photos. "Perfect, Mom! Hold that smile!" Evelyn held it, but it trembled. "If this moment hits you, tell me, who would you trust at a table where no one looks at you long enough to notice your eyes shine for the wrong reasons?" Dinner continued with the usual American small talk. Jobs, traffic, school schedules, promotions. Noise that filled space but not hearts. When Evelyn tried to share a small story about her neighbor's dog escaping again, Melissa hummed politely while checking her notifications. Daniel nodded absently without hearing a word. Jenna filmed the candles flickering behind her for a looping video captioned "Family Night." Even though the word family felt like a stretch, Evelyn's chest tightened. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. She was simply tired. Tired in the bone-deep way only older people understood, the kind of tiredness that came from realizing you've slowly become invisible to the people you raised. She noticed how the restaurant buzzed with life. Little kids ran between tables, squeezing past adults without apology. A couple toasted to something joyful. A grandmother nearby laughed, her family leaning in to hear her every word. Evelyn watched them with a soft ache in her chest. When had her own children stopped listening? What's the hardest goodbye you've ever faced? For Evelyn, it was losing the version of motherhood she had once believed in. Halfway through the meal, Melissa folded her napkin carefully and cleared her throat. The sound cut through the clinking silverware and low background chatter like a warning bell. Daniel put his phone down, which alone was alarming. Jenna stopped adjusting her hair. Another red flag. Evelyn felt her pulse throb in her temples. "Mom," Melissa began gently, though her voice carried the tone of a business negotiation, "we need to talk about some things tonight. Important things." Her smile was tight, practiced, rehearsed. Evelyn set down her fork slowly. "All right," she said, her voice steady even though her heart wasn't. "Have you ever felt a room close in around you before anyone even speaks?" Evelyn felt that now, like someone invisible had drawn the walls a little closer. Daniel leaned in, elbows on the table, hands clasped. "You know we love you," he said, words that always came before bad news. "But with everything going on, with work, with our schedules, We're just worried about you being alone so much." Jenna nodded too quickly. "We just want what's best for you," she added, her voice too sweet, too soft, too rehearsed. "You've been falling behind on things, Mom. You forget appointments. You call us multiple times a day because you get confused. And your house is, too big for you now." She shifted uncomfortably, as if she realized she had said too much. Evelyn blinked slowly. She did not call them multiple times a day. She had called Melissa once last week because she forgot the password to her online bank account. She had called Daniel because she couldn't lift the lawnmower anymore and wondered if he could swing by on Saturday. She had called Jenna because she wanted to ask how her audition had gone. 3 calls, not multiple times a day. Her breath thinned. "Are you saying I'm becoming a problem for you?" she asked quietly. "No," Melissa said too quickly. "Not a problem, just someone who needs more help than we can give right now." Evelyn's throat tightened. She reached for her water glass, her hand trembling. The ice clinked against the rim. The restaurant felt suddenly too warm, too loud, too bright. Then Melissa opened her structured leather handbag and pulled out a glossy, trifold brochure. It hit the table with a soft thud that sounded like betrayal. Across the top, in soft sky-blue letters, was written, "Willow Creek Senior Living, where your next chapter begins." Evelyn stared. The air around her warped. "What is this?" she whispered. Jenna leaned forward, eager but nervous. "It's really beautiful, Mom. They have game nights, physical therapy, a salon, even a shuttle service. You'd have people to talk to, and we can visit all the time." Daniel swallowed hard. "We already scheduled a tour," he said, voice dropping. "This Sunday." Evelyn's chest caved. A tour. Scheduled. Before she had even known there was a conversation to be had. 5 tables down, a group of teenagers sang "Happy Birthday" to an elderly man with more enthusiasm than her own children had shown. Evelyn watched them, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. "So you've all decided," she said softly. "Without me." Melissa reached for her mother's hand. "Mom, please don't get emotional. We're trying to help you." Evelyn pulled her hand away. "Help," she repeated. The word tasted like vinegar. "This isn't help. This is pushing me out." Her voice shook, not with fear, but with something deeper, something like grief. Melissa inhaled deeply, steeling herself. "Mom, we can't keep doing this. The late-night phone calls, the worries, the fear that you might fall or forget to lock the door or leave the stove on. We can't handle the constant stress anymore, and—" She hesitated. "And what?" Evelyn whispered. Daniel looked away, unable to hold her gaze. Jenna bit her lip. Melissa finally said it. "Mom, you're embarrassing us." The table went silent. The world went silent. A grandmother had just been told she brought shame to the family she had raised. "If this moment hits you, tell me. Have you ever seen someone break without making a sound?" Evelyn's voice came out in a rasp, barely audible. "I shame you." Melissa nodded slowly. "Sometimes, yes. You repeat stories. You forget names. You get confused in public. People notice." She exhaled shakily. "We can't keep pretending everything is fine." Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest. A sharp pain radiated outward, deep and aching. "So this is why you brought me here tonight?" she whispered. "Not to celebrate, but to remove me." Daniel winced. "Mom, don't say it like that." "How would you like me to say it?" she asked, her voice cracking. "That you're putting me away nicely?" Jenna's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't deny it. The room spun. The birthday cake blurred into nothing. The candles on other tables flickered like distant stars. And then, just as Evelyn tried to stand, gripping the edge of the table to steady herself, someone behind her gasped loudly. Because one sentence, spoken by a stranger who had overheard everything, was about to shatter the fragile illusion her children had built. "Excuse me, but she deserves better than this." And when Evelyn turned toward the voice, what she saw froze her in place. The voice came from a man seated at the next table, a man Evelyn had never seen before, His tone was steady but carried a tremor of disbelief, as if witnessing something he wished were different. He stood, revealing a tall frame, salt and pepper hair, and a kind but weathered expression. His eyes softened when they met Evelyn's. His name, as she would soon learn, was Frank Dawson, a retired firefighter who frequented the restaurant every Friday after visiting his late wife's grave. He placed a hand gently on the back of Evelyn's chair. "Ma'am," he said, "no one your age should be spoken to like that, not by anyone, and especially not by family." The words settled between the tables with an almost physical weight. Melissa stiffened immediately, her jaw tightening. Daniel looked away, embarrassed at being called out by a stranger. Jenna crossed her arms defensively, cheeks flushed. But Evelyn felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark, a flicker of dignity she feared had burned out. Evelyn's breath trembled, and suddenly she was back inside herself, fully present, painfully awake, because Frank's voice had reminded her of someone else, someone she had lost, and grief, once stirred, dragged memories behind it like a tide pulling at the sand. Have you ever had a stranger's kindness unlock a door in your heart you thought you'd sealed long ago? Her mind pulled her backward, to 1967, to the living room of a small Ohio farmhouse, to her husband, Henry Walker, sitting in his favorite armchair, reading a newspaper while their 3 young children played on the floor. Henry had been the opposite of her children now, attentive, patient, always searching her face to make sure she was truly okay. He used to say, "Family is the one place where you should never feel small." She had believed him then, but tonight she felt smaller than she ever imagined possible. Evelyn remembered cooking dinners in that narrow kitchen, stirring pots of soup while little feet pattered down the hallway. She remembered birthdays, when her children drew cards with crayons, proud and messy, handing them to her with icing still on their fingers. They used to adore her. They used to cling to her skirt, giggling as she shook them loose. But time was a thief. It crept silently. It stole softness from faces and warmth from voices. It replaced bedtime stories with missed phone calls and hugs with tight, impatient schedules. And then Henry died. He had been gone 21 years now, but Evelyn still felt his absence like a bruise that never fully healed. After his passing, she had tried her best to keep the family together. She hosted every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every 4th of July barbecue. She cooked until her feet ached, cleaned until her back screamed, and smiled even when her hands trembled from exhaustion. But slowly, so slowly she didn't notice at first, her children's visits grew shorter. Their excuses grew longer. Their affection grew thinner. "Sorry, Mom, we can't make it this year. Next weekend, I promise. Work is crazy right now. The kids have sports. We'll call soon." They never called. Not really. And now they were planning to place her somewhere safe, somewhere convenient, somewhere out of the way. Frank's presence jolted her back to the restaurant. The way he looked at her, firm, empathetic, protective, felt like a hand reaching through years of loneliness. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked quietly. Evelyn opened her mouth to answer, but Melissa spoke first. "Sir," she snapped, "this is a family matter." Frank didn't flinch. "Ma'am," he said to Evelyn again, "is this what you want? Or is this what they want?" A hush fell over the nearest tables. People pretended not to listen, but heads tilted subtly in Evelyn's direction. The room seemed to hold its breath. If you were sitting there, would you step in or stay silent? Sometimes silence is another form of cruelty. Evelyn swallowed hard. Her hands trembled in her lap. She wanted to speak. She wanted to say everything she'd swallowed for years. But her voice felt stuck behind a lifetime of keeping peace. Flashbacks tugged at her again. She remembered Melissa at age 7, running home from school because she'd forgotten her lunchbox. Evelyn had driven 4 blocks in the rain to bring it to her. Melissa had hugged her tightly and said, "You're the best mom." She remembered Daniel, crying after striking out in Little League. Evelyn had knelt in the dirt, cupping his face and whispering, "You're brave for trying. That's all that matters." She remembered Jenna, terrified after a nightmare, shaking in bed. Evelyn had held her until sunrise, singing softly. Jenna had said, "Promise you'll never leave me." And now, they were leaving her. Emotions surged up her throat. She tried to say, but her voice cracked. Tears pooled in her eyes. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in years. Frank pulled out the chair beside her. "You don't owe me an answer," he said softly. "But you deserve a voice in your own life." His words made Melissa bristle. "Mom has been struggling," she said sharply. "She forgets things. She repeats herself. She gets overwhelmed. You don't know her situation." Frank raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" Daniel stood abruptly. "That's enough. We're not discussing our mother's medical issues with a stranger." Frank didn't back down. "Then why were you discussing her future without her?" A ripple of murmurs moved through nearby tables. Evelyn's heart pounded, fragile but fierce. She found her voice, thin, trembling, but real. "I don't want to go," she whispered. Melissa's eyes widened. "Mom? I don't want to leave my home," Evelyn continued. "I don't want to live in a place where I'm placed. I want to stay where Henry and I built our life." Daniel looked conflicted, torn between guilt and frustration. Jenna wiped her eyes, shifting between anger and shame. But Melissa hardened. "Mom, you're being emotional." "You don't understand how unsafe things have become." Evelyn stiffened. "I understand perfectly. If you were in her place, would you fight back or give in?" A waitress approached timidly, sensing the tension. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, glancing nervously at Melissa's rigid posture and Evelyn's trembling hands. Frank responded gently. No, it's not." Melissa huffed. "Mom is confused. She needs guidance, not interference." Frank shook his head. "She's not confused. She's heartbroken." The truth echoed. Heartbroken. Evelyn felt something bloom painfully in her chest. Recognition. The restaurant noise seemed to fade. The music dimmed. Even the smell of garlic felt distant. She whispered, "Henry would never let this happen." Melissa tensed. "Mom, Dad has been gone for 20 years. Evelyn met her daughter's eyes with surprising strength. "Yes, and he would be ashamed of this." Daniel flinched. Jenna bit back a sob. Melissa's nostrils flared, but her eyes flickered with something Evelyn wasn't expecting. Fear. Because deep down, Melissa knew Evelyn was right. Frank leaned closer, speaking softly enough that only Evelyn could hear. "If you ever need help," he murmured, "I'm around. Every Friday. Same table." Evelyn felt her breath catch. Kindness, when you haven't felt it in years, hits harder than cruelty. The moment was interrupted by the sound of cutlery clattering. Jenna had accidentally knocked over her fork. The metal bounced on the tile floor, echoing loudly. She bent to pick it up, but when she rose, her face was pale. Because from her angle, she had seen something under the table. It was a small black device, red light blinking, recording. Someone sitting nearby, had recorded the entire conversation. Melissa's eyes darted under the table, widening in horror. Daniel's face drained of color. Frank's jaw tightened. Evelyn felt her pulse hammer in her ears. Because the real storm wasn't the argument at the table, it was the fact that someone had captured every word they said, and was about to stand up with the proof. And then the person who placed the recorder pushed back their chair and rose slowly to their feet. The person who rose from the neighboring table was a teenage girl, 16, maybe 17, wearing a dark hoodie with the word Cleveland printed across the front. Earbuds dangled from her neck, and a half-eaten slice of pizza sat forgotten on her plate. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the tiny recorder between her fingers, the red light blinking like a heartbeat exposed. Her parents, seated beside her, stared in shock. The mother whispered urgently, "Maddie, what are you doing?" But the girl didn't break the gaze she'd fixed on Melissa, Daniel, and Jenna. She swallowed hard before speaking. I wasn't trying to spy," she stammered. "I swear, I record things sometimes for a school project, and I accidentally caught all of this." A murmur ran through nearby diners, some pretending not to listen, others leaning subtly closer. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as Maddie continued. "I heard the way you talked to her," she said, her voice steadying, "and I thought, someone has to say something. Someone has to do something." Then she turned to Evelyn with soft, earnest eyes. "No one deserves to be treated like that. Not ever." Melissa's face drained of color. "Delete it," she ordered, her voice sharp and brittle. "Now!" Maddie flinched but didn't lower the recorder. "My teacher says sometimes the truth needs to be heard, even when it makes people uncomfortable." Her father reached for her arm, but Maddie stepped aside. This wasn't rebellion, it was conviction. Daniel rose halfway from his chair, agitation pulsing through him. "Listen, kid," he snapped. "This is a private family conversation. You can't just record us. That's illegal." But even he didn't sound convinced of what he was saying. It wasn't the legality that panicked him. It was the exposure. Frank stood too, stepping protectively closer to Evelyn. "She didn't ask for privacy," he said. "She asked for respect, and you gave her anything but." His voice rumbled with restrained anger. Evelyn sat frozen, heart trembling like a fragile bird. She could barely process what was happening. A stranger had defended her. A girl had recorded the truth, and her children, her own flesh and blood, looked more worried about their reputations than her feelings. Have you ever watched someone reveal their true priorities in a single moment? Sometimes you don't need years to understand who people really are. Just one crisis. Melissa forced a tight smile, the kind that hid venom behind politeness. "Sweetheart," she said to Maddie, "you don't understand the situation. Our mother is ill. She forgets things. She gets confused. We're trying to help her." She emphasized the word ill, as if planting it in the minds of everyone watching. Evelyn snapped back into herself. "I am not ill," she said sharply. The statement pierced through the noise with surprising force. "I forget things sometimes, yes. But so do you, Melissa. I get confused sometimes, but so does anyone my age. That does not make me incapable." Her voice wavered, but her conviction did not. Jenna's eyes filled with tears and shame. She knew their mother wasn't mentally declining. She knew the exaggerations were convenient, not true. But Melissa shot her a warning look, and Jenna stayed silent. Maddie's mother stood now too, trying to smooth the tension. "I'm sure no one wants this to escalate," she said gently. But the moment she looked at Evelyn's trembling hands, her tone hardened. "But I will say this. I've worked in elder care for 20 years. I know the difference between being forgetful and being incapable of living independently. And this woman," she pointed at Evelyn, "is still very much here." Evelyn's eyes widened. A stranger's validation felt like oxygen after years of emotional suffocation. Melissa exhaled sharply. "This is ridiculous. Mom, stand up. We're leaving." But Evelyn didn't move, because again, memories flooded her, this time darker ones. Days after Henry died, she had begged Melissa to come home for just a weekend to help clean out the garage. Melissa had said she was too busy with her new law internship. Daniel had promised to fly in for the anniversary of their father's passing, but he hadn't. Jenna said she felt awkward around sad things, and didn't visit for months. Evelyn had forgiven them all. Forgiveness had been her default. But what if forgiveness had been the thing enabling their cruelty? If this moment hits you, ask yourself, have you ever protected someone who never protected you back? Her fingers clenched the edge of the table. "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly. "Not until I finish my meal." A stunned silence followed. For the first time in years, Evelyn had put her foot down. Melissa's eyes narrowed. "Mom, enough. This is embarrassing." "Embarrassing," Evelyn whispered. "You think I embarrass you after everything I did? After everything I gave?" Her voice cracked, but the truth poured out anyway. "I stayed up with you through fevers. I saved every birthday card you ever made. I gave you my time, my youth, my heart. And now you think I'm something to hide, something to relocate when inconvenient?" Daniel looked down at the floor, guilt spreading across his face like a shadow. Jenna covered her mouth, tears pooling. But Melissa's expression only hardened further. the facade of the responsible eldest, the one who believed control made her strong. "Mom," she gritted, "we are trying to prevent something worse. You can't live alone anymore. You're not safe." Evelyn lifted her chin. "What unsafe thing happened to me?" Melissa hesitated, because the truth was brutal. Nothing had happened to Evelyn. The fear was about their own inconvenience, their own busy schedules, their own guilt for not visiting enough. Maddie's recording pulsed between them like a ticking bomb. Her father finally whispered, "Honey, maybe stop recording." But Maddie shook her head. "Not until she's okay." And Evelyn felt something inside her, something long buried, begin to rise. A small, fierce ember. Her dignity, her self-worth, her voice. Frank leaned down. "You're stronger than you think," he whispered. "Don't let them silence you." Melissa snapped, "Stop interfering!" Frank didn't even blink. "Maybe if you listened to her, I wouldn't need to." Evelyn inhaled deeply, chest trembling. "You talk about safety," she whispered to her children, "but have you ever asked what makes me feel safe?" She looked at each of them. First Melissa, then Daniel, then Jenna. "Do you know the last time one of you hugged me? Really hugged me? Not a quick pat on the shoulder, a real embrace." No one spoke. "Do you know the last time one of you asked how I was sleeping, eating, feeling?" she asked. "I'll tell you. Your father was still alive." Daniel covered his face with one hand, shoulders shaking. Jenna wiped her tears but still said nothing. Melissa remained icy, and that silence, especially Melissa's, hurt more than any insult could. Have you ever seen someone face the truth about their family and realize love doesn't always mean kindness? Evelyn suddenly felt light-headed. Spots flickered at the edges of her vision. The emotional weight of the night pressed down on her chest like a stone. She reached for the table, gripping the wood, trying to steady herself. Frank noticed immediately and bent down. "Are you all right?" "I just need a moment," she whispered. Jenna moved toward her for the first time that evening, instinct overriding fear. Mom, breathe, please." Daniel rushed to her side, guilt spilling from his expression. "Mom, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. We didn't mean for this to happen tonight." But Melissa snapped, "Don't apologize, Daniel. She's being dramatic." Frank stood sharply. "She's not being dramatic. She's in distress." Maddie's recorder blinked again. Her mother reached for her phone. "Should I call someone?" But before anyone could decide, Evelyn's body swayed dangerously. The room tilted. Her breath hitched. Her knees buckled. Frank caught her shoulders just as she collapsed forward. Gasps erupted around the restaurant. Jenna screamed. Daniel lunged toward her. Melissa froze in shock. And then, as the entire restaurant stared, the front door slammed open. A voice shouted, "Call 911! Now!" The restaurant fell into chaos the moment Evelyn collapsed, her frail body cradled awkwardly in Frank's steady arms. Chairs scraped, silverware clattered, and gasps rippled through the room like shock waves. Evelyn's eyes fluttered, lids trembling as she struggled to stay conscious. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, as if her own breath had turned against her. The man who'd shouted for help rushed forward, a paramedic off duty, still wearing his EMS jacket. His name patch read Lopez, and his face shifted instantly into professional focus. "Move back," he ordered, lifting Evelyn's chin gently. "She needs air." Melissa froze. Daniel trembled. Jenna sobbed. But Frank stayed beside Evelyn like an anchor, refusing to release her hand. Paramedic Lopez checked Evelyn's pulse, his brow furrowing. "It's fast," he muttered. "Too fast." He placed 2 fingers on her wrist again. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Stay with us." Evelyn blinked weakly, her lips barely parting. "Henry," she whispered, confusing present with the past, or maybe simply reaching for the one person who had always made her feel safe. Daniel knelt beside her, guilt shaking through him. "Mom, I'm here. But she didn't look at him. Her eyes drifted, searching for a memory she could hold on to. And Melissa, seeing her mother reach for someone long gone instead of her, felt something crack beneath her polished exterior. Fear she couldn't disguise. The restaurant staff cleared space around the table. ushering customers aside with hushed apologies. Nearby diners whispered anxiously, hands covering mouths. Maddie gripped her recorder so tightly her fingers reddened, the blinking light illuminating her shaken face. "Please don't die," she whispered under her breath. "Please." "Sir, have you ever prayed for a stranger because their pain felt too familiar to ignore?" Lopez signaled to the waiter to bring water and asked for a cold cloth. "Ma'am, try to take slow breaths," he urged, but Evelyn's chest heaved shallowly, each inhale thinner than the last. Panic shimmered in her eyes, not from the physical episode but from something deeper, something older, the terror of being truly alone. Memories flashed through her mind in fragmented pieces. Christmas mornings, Henry's warm hands, baby laughter, porch swings in the summer, the day Melissa left for college, Daniel's first heartbreak, Jenna sleeping on her lap after her first dance recital. Life spiraled through her like a film reel spinning out of control. And now she was surrounded by the people she raised, but none felt close. None except, maybe Frank. Melissa paced in frantic circles, her polished heels clicking against the floor. "This is exactly what I was talking about," she said through panicked breaths. "She's not well. She needs professional supervision." But Frank shot her a furious look. "She needs compassion," he countered. "Not control." Jenna ignored the argument and knelt beside her mother. "Mom, please look at me," she whispered, brushing a trembling hand across Evelyn's cheek. Her tears fell freely now, mascara streaking down her skin. "I'm here. I'm right here." It was the first sincere thing she had said all night. Suddenly, Evelyn's breathing hitched, then slowed. Too much. Too fast. Lopez swore under his breath. "She's going into near syncope. We need EMS here now." Daniel fumbled for his phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. His voice cracked as he spoke. "My mom. She collapsed. We're at Romano's on 14th Street. Please hurry." While Daniel made the call, Lopez leaned closer to Evelyn. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I need you to stay with me. Think of something that brings you comfort. Someone you love." His voice softened further. "Who do you trust?" Her lips moved, barely audible. "Not them," she whispered. Her children recoiled as if struck. A few people at nearby tables covered their mouths in shock. Frank squeezed her hand gently, an unspoken promise in the gesture. "If this moment hits you, tell me, who would you want holding your hand when the world starts fading?" The front door burst open, and two uniformed paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. They moved with swift precision, assessing her condition, securing her to oxygen, asking rapid-fire questions Melissa barely answered. As they lifted Evelyn onto the stretcher, her fragile fingers slipped from Frank's grasp, and she whimpered at the loss of touch. She didn't reach for Melissa, or Daniel, or Jenna. Her trembling hand reached toward Frank. Frank stepped closer instantly. "I'm here," he murmured. "You're not alone." Evelyn exhaled shakily, and for a moment her eyes seemed clearer, tired but clear. There is something powerful in being seen by someone with no obligation to love you. Sometimes strangers give us the compassion family forgets. Melissa finally snapped, "Why is he acting like her guardian? He's nothing to us." Her anger cracked through the room like lightning. Maddie's eyes narrowed, and she muttered under her breath, "Maybe he's treating her the way family should." Before anyone could respond, Lopez looked up sharply. "Who's riding with her?" The three siblings froze. Silence. Frank stepped forward without hesitation. "I will." Melissa spun toward him.
"No, you will not," she hissed. But Jenna interrupted her. "Mom wants him," she whispered. Melissa blinked in disbelief. "You don't know that." Jenna pointed to Evelyn's outstretched hand, now weakly reaching toward the space where Frank stood. "Yes," Jenna whispered. "I do." Frank climbed into the ambulance beside Evelyn, settling into the seat while paramedics secured her IV. The siren roared to life, red lights reflecting off the restaurant windows like warning flares. The doors slammed shut.
And for the first time since her husband's death, Evelyn allowed herself to lean, truly lean, on someone else. As the ambulance sped away, Melissa stood motionless on the sidewalk, arms wrapped around herself. Daniel stared at the pavement, shame burning through him. Jenna sobbed into her sleeves. Behind them, Maddie played back the audio on her recorder, hearing every cruel sentence echo back like an indictment. She looked at her parents and whispered, "We can't just leave. We have to go to the hospital too." Inside the ambulance, paramedic Sarah monitored Evelyn's vitals while Frank held her hand. Evelyn blinked weakly. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "Because you shouldn't have to face this alone," Frank said simply. A tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek. "Henry would thank you," she breathed. Frank swallowed hard, the mention of another man pulling at something deep within him. "If he loved you," he said gently, "I'm honored to follow his example." The ambulance turned sharply. Evelyn winced. Frank leaned closer. "When this is over," he murmured, "you won't go back to that loneliness. I won't let you." Her eyes fluttered closed, not in fear, but in trust. Then a piercing beeping erupted from the monitor. Sarah stiffened, eyes widening. Frank's heart dropped. "Her heart rhythm," Sarah said urgently. "It's changing, going unstable." The monitor spiked wildly. Alarms screamed. Frank froze. The paramedic yelled toward the driver, "Step on it!" And as the ambulance lunged forward, lights blazing, Evelyn's body went suddenly limp. The ambulance jolted violently as it sped through downtown Cleveland, sirens wailing like a warning the night refused to ignore. Evelyn lay motionless on the stretcher, her pale face illuminated by the harsh red and white flashes. The heart monitor next to her screamed in chaotic beeps, each one a reminder that something inside her fragile body was failing fast. Frank leaned forward, gripping the metal railing, his pulse hammering against his throat. Paramedic Sarah tightened the oxygen mask over Evelyn's face. "She's going into atrial fibrillation, rapid onset," she barked, her training overriding emotion. "Her rhythm's unstable. We're losing perfusion." She attached defibrillator pads to Evelyn's chest as her partner prepared an IV drip. The ambulance swayed as they took a sharp turn, the wheels squealing against the asphalt. Frank swallowed hard, forcing back panic. "Evelyn," he whispered, leaning closer. "Stay with us. Stay with me. You're not alone." But her eyelids fluttered weakly, barely responding. He felt helpless, like watching a building burn with no hose, no crew, no tools. Isn't it terrifying how quickly someone can slip from your life, even when you're holding their hand? A sudden dip in heart rhythm made the monitors shriek. Sarah cursed under her breath. "Her pressure's crashing." She turned to her partner. "Push one of EPI, now." A syringe pierced the line in Evelyn's arm, and a rush of medication surged through her veins. Frank watched the tiny body twitch slightly, the only visible sign she was still fighting. He tried talking again, his voice barely steady. "Evelyn, you've lived through storms tougher than this. You raised 3 kids. You buried the love of your life. You survived heartache they never even knew about." His voice broke. "You are not leaving tonight. Do you hear me?" But the look Sarah shot him made his stomach drop. She wasn't sure Evelyn could hear anything at all. Back in the restaurant parking lot, Evelyn's children stood in the cold wind, staring at the empty space where the ambulance had been minutes earlier. Melissa rubbed her arms, jaw clenched so tightly it trembled. Daniel paced in frantic circles, running a hand through his hair. Jenna sat on the curb, face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel finally stopped, turning toward Melissa. "This is our fault," he whispered, voice cracking. "We pushed too hard. We pushed her into this." But Melissa snapped, "No! She did this to herself. She refuses to accept she needs help." Even she seemed unsure of the words as they left her mouth, her voice wavering like she didn't fully believe them. Jenna lifted her tear-streaked face. "She didn't do anything wrong," she choked. We made her feel alone. We made her feel like a burden." Her words shattered something inside Daniel. He sank beside her, burying his face in his hands as guilt crushed him from all sides. Meanwhile, Maddie and her parents stood a few feet away, their expressions torn between shock and moral fury. Maddie whispered to her mom, "Should I delete the recording?" Her mother shook her head slowly. "Not yet. Sometimes the truth needs to exist, even when it's painful. Maddie looked toward the road the ambulance had taken, praying silently for Evelyn's life. Inside the speeding ambulance, Sarah checked the monitor again. Her rhythm is still unstable. If it doesn't convert with meds, we'll need to shock. Frank felt the room spin. He had seen people die. He was no stranger to emergency situations. But this time, it wasn't a stranger. It was the woman who'd reminded him of his late wife's grace, resilience, and quiet courage. This time, losing someone would feel personal. He squeezed Evelyn's cold hand. "You told me Henry would thank me," he said softly. "Well, Henry would want you to keep fighting. Don't leave him yet. Don't leave us yet." Tears slipped from his eyes, falling onto the straps holding her in place. If you were in his position, watching a kind soul fade, would you beg them to stay too? The monitor suddenly spiked, then flatlined into a chaotic rhythm that made Sarah's body tense. "She's going into ventricular tachycardia," she yelled. "We're shocking on my command. Stand clear." Her partner handed her the paddles, and she positioned them carefully on Evelyn's small chest. "Charging 150 joules." Frank's breath caught. "Clear!" Evelyn's body jerked upward as electricity surged through her. The monitor beeped erratically, still unstable. "Charging again. 200 joules." "Clear!" Another jolt. Another violent arch of her frail body. Frank felt like he might collapse. "Please," he whispered. "Please." Then a weak rhythm fluttered onto the screen. Not perfect, not safe, but something. Sarah exhaled shakily. "We've got a pulse, but it's faint." She leaned closer to Evelyn's face, tapping lightly on her shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" But Evelyn's eyes remained half-lidded, unfocused, drifting in a place between here and somewhere far away. As the ambulance screeched into the Cleveland Memorial ER bay, a team of doctors and nurses rushed out with a crash cart. They whisked Evelyn inside before Frank could even stand. "Wait," he called. "I'm with her." A nurse placed a hand on his chest. "We'll update you. Please wait in the family room." Family! The word burned. He wasn't her family. Not legally. Not by blood. But maybe emotionally, maybe spiritually, he was more present than the ones who claimed the title. He watched through the swinging doors as the team surrounded her, working with mechanical precision. He felt useless, helpless, terrified. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to love, at least not yet, and feared losing them before you had the courage to say it? Minutes later, Melissa, Daniel, and Jenna burst into the ER waiting room. Melissa stormed toward the nurse. "We're the Walkers. Where is our mother?" The nurse remained calm. "She's being stabilized. Please have a seat." Melissa didn't sit. She paced. Daniel sat but shook uncontrollably. Jenna curled into herself, rocking back and forth. Frank stayed near the wall, arms crossed tightly over his chest. He didn't want to intrude, but he couldn't leave. He wouldn't leave. A doctor suddenly emerged from the trauma room, still wearing gloves stained with fresh antiseptic. "Family of Evelyn Walker?" he called out. All three siblings jumped up. Frank did too, though he stopped himself before stepping forward. The doctor spoke with measured calm. "Your mother is stable for now, but she experienced a significant cardiac event. We need to run more tests, but it was likely stress-induced. Difficulty breathing, increased adrenaline, emotional strain." His eyes flicked over the siblings, his meaning painfully clear. Jenna burst into tears again. Daniel sagged against the wall, but Melissa straightened, her expression shuddered. "What happens next?" she asked. "We admit her for observation," the doctor replied. "She will need calm. No stress, no arguments, no triggers." His voice grew firm. "She needs peace. Peace." Something she hadn't felt in years. As the doctor walked away, Melissa suddenly turned toward Frank. "You," she spat. "This is your fault. You inserted yourself. You caused chaos. You overwhelmed her." Frank's expression hardened. "No, I listened to her. You overwhelmed her. You don't know us," Melissa hissed. "You don't know our family." Frank stepped closer, eyes burning with controlled anger. "She was alone long before tonight. Don't pretend this started with me." Daniel pulled at Melissa's arm. "Stop! Not here! Not now!" But she shook him off, glaring at Frank with fury sharpened by guilt. "Stay away from our mother," she warned. "You have no right to be here." Frank stared back without blinking. "Then why?" he asked softly. "Did she ask for me, and not you?" That made Jenna break again. But before Melissa could respond, the trauma room door opened. A nurse stepped out, eyes scanning the group. Her expression was grave, too grave. She lifted one hand and beckoned. "Her heart rhythm is changing again," the nurse said. "You need to come now." Frank's stomach dropped. Daniel grabbed Jenna's hand. Melissa froze like stone. And Evelyn, somewhere behind those doors, was fighting again. The nurse added quietly, "And there's something else you need to see." The nurse led the group down a long corridor that smelled of antiseptic and quiet dread. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting pale reflections on the polished hospital floor as the Walkers and Frank followed in tense silence. Every footstep echoed with equal parts fear and guilt. Evelyn was somewhere ahead of them, fragile, hurting, possibly fading, and none of them knew what they would find behind the next door. They stopped outside a room labeled Heart Observation, 214. The nurse stepped aside, motioning for them to enter. "She's awake," she said softly, "but weak. Keep your voices low and your emotions controlled. Stress is dangerous for her right now." Her gaze lingered pointedly on Melissa before she walked away. Inside, Evelyn lay in a narrow hospital bed, wires tracing soft curves across her chest and arms. Machines hummed gently, beeping with slow steadiness, a relief compared to the frantic alarms earlier. Her eyes were half open, drifting in and out of focus, but there was color in her cheeks again. Fragile color, but color nonetheless. Frank exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He stepped forward instinctively, but stopped himself halfway, waiting, hoping for some sign she wanted him there. Evelyn's gaze flickered toward him. Her lips curved just barely. Not a smile, not quite, but something warm, an invitation. He moved to her bedside, avoiding the wires, and gently took her hand in his. "Hey," he whispered, voice trembling. "You scared me." Evelyn blinked slowly, leaning her cheek against the pillow. "Did I fall?" she asked, her voice thin like paper. "Yes," Frank murmured, "but you're here." You held on. Behind them, Melissa, Daniel, and Jenna hovered near the door, uncertain whether to come closer. For the first time in a long time, they weren't the center of the moment. They weren't the ones Evelyn reached for. That realization hit each of them differently. Shame for Daniel, heartbreak for Jenna, and something darker, harder for Melissa. Jenna moved first. She approached the bed slowly, arms wrapped around herself. "Mom," she whispered, swallowing back tears. "I'm so sorry." Evelyn turned her head slightly, studying her daughter's tear-stained face. "Oh, honey," she breathed. "Don't cry." But Jenna broke anyway, resting her forehead on the edge of the mattress. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I didn't know you felt so alone." Evelyn lifted a trembling hand toward her daughter's face. Jenna leaned in to feel the warmth of her touch. "I didn't want you to worry," Evelyn whispered. "Mothers do that. Hide things." Her eyes softened. "Did you know that? If this moment hits you, share your truth. Have you ever watched someone you love hide their pain just to protect you?" Daniel stepped forward next. His voice shook as he spoke. "Mom, I'm sorry too." He rubbed his eyes, unable to hold back the emotion any longer. "I should have been there more. I should have visited. I should have answered the phone." Evelyn gave him a sad, gentle look. "You were living your life," she murmured. I never wanted to be a burden." The word burden sliced Daniel open. He dropped to his knees beside the bed. Melissa, however, stayed frozen near the doorway. Her fingers dug into the straps of her purse, knuckles pale. Her face remained composed, but her shoulders trembled ever so slightly. It was the first sign she wasn't as solid as she pretended to be, but she still didn't move. A soft knock sounded at the door. A nurse entered, holding a printout chart. "Mrs. Walker," she said gently, "your new tests look better than expected." Your heart rhythm is stabilizing. You'll need monitoring for a few days, but you're out of immediate danger." Relief poured over the group like a warm wind after a long storm. Frank closed his eyes, exhaling shakily. Jenna let out a breathless sob of gratitude. Daniel thanked the nurse over and over. Even Melissa's shoulders sagged, though she masked it quickly. Evelyn blinked up at the nurse. "I get to go home soon?" she asked softly. The nurse hesitated. "That depends," she said carefully. "Your home situation, your support system, your stress levels." She glanced discreetly at the three siblings. "And whether your environment is good for your heart." The room tensed. Frank leaned slightly closer to Evelyn, still holding her hand. She squeezed his fingers weakly. He didn't let go. Jenna wiped her eyes and whispered, "Mom, we'll do better. All of us. We'll come by more. We'll call." Her voice shook with sincerity. Evelyn gave her a faint smile. "One day at a time," she murmured. Daniel nodded frantically. "We'll fix things. We will." But Melissa's voice cut through the moment. "You can't keep living alone," she said flatly. The room froze. Evelyn's smile faded. "Melissa," Frank warned softly, but Melissa held up her hand. "I'm not saying it to be cruel," she insisted. "I'm saying it because it's true. Look at what happened tonight. You could have died, and none of us were there." Evelyn's eyes darkened with hurt. "Melissa?" "No," Melissa pressed on. "We're done pretending you're fine by yourself. We have to make a decision. For your safety." Frank clenched his jaw. "It's not your decision alone." Melissa glared at him. "She's not your mother." Jenna flinched. Daniel looked sick. Frank lowered his voice. "You're right. I'm not her son. I'm someone who listened." Melissa's face flushed, but she refused to look away. Evelyn's heart monitor beeped faster. Too fast. The stress was returning. The nurse stepped forward. "Everyone stop," she warned. "Her heart can't handle emotional spikes." Jenna grabbed Melissa's arm. "Please stop. You're hurting her." Melissa jerked her arm free. "I'm trying to help her," Evelyn whispered. "Please. No fighting." But Melissa didn't hear it, or didn't choose to. A doctor entered then, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Walker," he said carefully, "your tests also show signs of long-term stress that seems centered around emotional strain." He looked at the siblings. "Do any of you know what might be contributing to that?" Daniel wilted under the weight of the question. Jenna cried silently. Melissa crossed her arms, defensive. Frank finally stepped away from the wall. "She's lonely," he said softly. "She's isolated. She's been grieving for years, and nobody noticed." The truth landed heavy. Melissa opened her mouth to argue, but the doctor held up his hand. "Let me be clear," he said firmly. "What Evelyn needs most right now is not a facility. It's people, support, connection, calm." Daniel nodded rapidly. "We can give her that. We'll do better." Jenna nodded too. "We will, I promise." Melissa said nothing. The doctor gave Evelyn's chart to the nurse. "She can have one visitor at a time for now. Her stress levels need control. Choose carefully." He left them with that warning echoing behind him. Evelyn looked at her children with pleading eyes. "Please, don't fight," she whispered. "Not now." Jenna hugged her gently. "We won't, Mom." Daniel stepped back, wiping his face. "I'll wait outside." Melissa forced a smile. "I'll go get water," she said stiffly. But the tightness in her voice suggested she wasn't going to the cafeteria. She was walking away to think, to unravel, to justify, to plot something she wasn't ready to say out loud. When the siblings left the room, Frank leaned close again. "You scared all of us," he whispered. "But you fought. You're still here." Evelyn's tired eyes softened. "I'm glad. You are too." A small light, hesitant, fragile but real, glowed between them. A kind of hope Evelyn never expected to find again. "I don't want to be alone anymore," she whispered. Frank swallowed. "You won't be." But then a figure appeared in the doorway. Melissa. Only now her face was cold, determined, darkened by something dangerous. She stepped inside and closed the door slowly behind her, and in a low voice she said, "Mom, we need to talk." Alone. Melissa closed the hospital door behind her with a soft click, but the sound felt louder than any slam. The room instantly shrank, the air thickening with unspoken tension. Evelyn's heartbeat monitor beeped steadily, too steadily, as if trying to behave for the sake of the moment. Frank lingered at the foot of the bed, unwilling to leave unless Evelyn asked him to. Melissa shot him a cold look. "I said alone," she repeated, her voice low but sharp. But Evelyn's hand tightened around Frank's. "I want him here," she whispered. "Please." The request sliced through Melissa's composure like a blade. Her eyes narrowed. "Fine," she said quietly. "But then we're all going to hear the truth." She stepped closer to the bed, placing both hands on the metal railing, leaning in until she was only inches from her mother's face. Evelyn blinked, wary and weak. "Melissa," she murmured. "What truth?" Melissa inhaled shakily, nostrils flaring as she tried to steady her trembling voice. "Mom, I didn't want to say this tonight, but after what happened, after all this chaos, I can't hold it in anymore." Her pulse throbbed visibly at her neck. You've been keeping secrets from us." Evelyn's brows furrowed. "Secrets," she echoed softly. Her voice carried confusion, not guilt. What secrets could I possibly have? Daniel and Jenna were just outside the door, unaware of what was being said. Only Frank saw Melissa's composure beginning to crack, not from grief, but from something darker, something festering. Melissa reached into her purse and pulled out a thin stack of envelopes, folded papers, and a small notebook. She dropped them onto the end of the hospital bed. "These," she said. "I found them last month." Evelyn's heart monitor skipped, a quick spike of stress. Frank's jaw tightened as he stepped closer to the bed. The envelopes spilled open slightly, revealing return labels and unfamiliar names. Evelyn stared at them, confused, then startled, as if recognizing something she had never expected to be seen. Her fingers twitched weakly. Melissa seized the reaction. "You do know what this is." Evelyn swallowed. "Melissa, those are personal." "Personal?" Melissa's laugh was brittle. "Mom, we thought you were just lonely, just fragile, just slipping emotionally. But these letters, they show something else, something you hid." Frank looked at Evelyn gently. "What are they?" Evelyn's eyes flickered toward him, shimmering with a mix of hesitation and shame. "They're from people I used to help," she whispered. "Old neighbors, women from the church, people who needed someone to talk to." Melissa shook her head. "Not just that." She opened one envelope and pulled out a letter. "This one says, 'Thank you for paying my electric bill last winter. I don't know what I would have done without you.'" Frank's eyes softened, but Melissa's hardened further. "And this one, 'Thank you for helping with the medical copay when I couldn't afford my insulin.' And another, 'I'll never forget the groceries you left on my porch.'" Evelyn turned her face away, eyes glistening. Melissa slammed the stack down. "Thousands of dollars, Mom. Thousands." Evelyn winced. "They needed help." Melissa's voice dropped, trembling not from anger but from fear. "We thought you were forgetting to pay your bills because of age, but your account is low because you kept draining it helping strangers." She stepped back as if betrayed. "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you ask us for help?" Evelyn whispered. "Because I didn't want to be a burden." Melissa staggered slightly as if the floor shifted beneath her. "Have you ever heard a truth so painful it made your entire worldview collapse?" Frank moved closer, his expression soft yet fierce with admiration. "You were giving, quietly, selflessly." Melissa snapped at him. "Stay out of this." Evelyn shook her head. "No, he's right." Tears finally slipped down Melissa's face, but she wiped them away angrily. "Do you know what this means?" she whispered. "You can't afford in-home care. You can't afford repairs on the house. You can't afford your medication if anything changes. You gave away everything without telling us." Her last words came out cracked, broken. Evelyn's chin quivered. "They needed help more than I did." Melissa paced to the window, gripping the sill so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Mom, we didn't want to put you in a home because you were old. We wanted to because we thought you were declining, forgetting." mismanaging, losing track. She turned around slowly. But now I see. You didn't forget. You chose. The truth washed over the room like a cold tide. Evelyn whispered, "Is that so terrible?" Melissa choked. "Yes, because you suffered alone. You struggled alone. You could have lost the house, the utilities. You could have starved." Her breath hitched. "Why didn't you trust us?" Evelyn stared at her daughter with heartbreaking honesty. "Because you were never home long enough to listen." The room went still. Frank felt the words like a punch. In the hallway, someone passed by pushing a cart, wheels squeaking softly. But inside the room, silence pressed in from all sides. Melissa's lip trembled. "Mom!" But Evelyn continued, voice fragile yet unwavering. "Every time I tried to tell you something important, you'd say you were busy. Every time I asked you to sit with me, you'd say later. Every time I called, you'd rush off the phone." A tear slid down her cheek. "Eventually, I stopped trying." Melissa covered her mouth, shaking. Evelyn closed her eyes. "Helping others made me feel useful again, like I still mattered." Frank placed a hand gently over hers. "You do matter." Melissa stumbled forward, falling into the chair beside the bed. "I'm sorry," she whispered hoarsely. "I didn't know." Another tear escaped. "I didn't see it." Evelyn opened her eyes, looking at her eldest child with a tenderness that had survived years of hurt. "You haven't looked at me, really looked at me, since your father died." Melissa burst into tears, quiet and raw. Frank softened his voice. "This doesn't mean she needs to lose her independence. It means she needs support, not removal." His gaze leveled with Melissa's. "There's a difference." Melissa stared at him, the fight draining from her. I just wanted her safe." Evelyn whispered, "Then ask me what safety means to me." Melissa nodded shakily, brushing tears away. "Okay. What does safety mean to you?" Evelyn's answer broke and mended hearts at the same time. "Safety is not being forgotten." The room filled with a long, aching silence, a silence that felt like a turning point. Melissa reached for her mother's hand. This time, Evelyn let her. But just as a fragile peace settled over them, Daniel and Jenna re-entered the room, faces pale. Jenna was crying again, not soft, not quietly, but with real fear twisting her expression. "Mom," Jenna sobbed, "you need to see this." Daniel held his phone out with shaking hands. A video played on the screen. Not just audio, video. Someone had recorded the entire restaurant scene, not just Maddie's audio, but a full, clear video capturing every cruel sentence, every argument, every accusation against Evelyn. Someone had already posted it online. Thousands of views, thousands of comments, hundreds of people calling it abuse. Melissa's face drained of all color. And then Daniel whispered, "It's going viral." For a long moment, no one in the hospital room moves. The only sound is the slow, steady beeping of Evelyn's heart monitor and the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights. Daniel's hands shake as he holds up his phone, the video still playing. Evelyn at the restaurant table, Melissa's words clear as glass. "Mom, you're embarrassing us." The comments underneath scroll in a blur of outrage and disbelief. Jenna leans in, her eyes wide and horrified as strangers call them monsters, abusers, ungrateful children. Some users tag elder advocacy groups. Others threaten to report them to authorities. One comment reads, "If this was my grandma, I'd take her in myself." Another says, "This is exactly what's wrong with how we treat our elders in this country. If this moment hits you, tell me honestly, would you defend your parent in public or stay quiet to protect your image?" Melissa staggers back as if struck, hand flying to her mouth. Her face, perfectly composed in the restaurant, is now blasted across 1,000 screens. Her cold tone, her harsh phrasing, frozen forever in pixels. "Turn it off," she whispers, voice tight. "Turn it off, Daniel." But Daniel just stares, guilt flooding his expression. "We did this," he says hoarsely. "We really did this." Outside the room, nurses huddle at the station, watching the same video shared in a staff group chat. One of them recognizes the wallpaper and lights in the clip and whispers, "Isn't that Mrs. Walker in 214? A charge nurse frowns deeply. "Send this to the hospital social worker," she says. Now. Justice, small and quiet, begins with someone refusing to look away. Back in the room, Evelyn listens as Daniel explains, his voice breaking. "Someone recorded us at the restaurant, Mom. They posted it online. A lot of people have seen it. She doesn't fully understand going viral, but she understands being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years." "They saw how you spoke to me?" she asks softly, eyes flicking toward Melissa. Melissa's face crumples. "Mom, It was taken out of context," she stammers, even as she knows that's not true. The context makes it worse. Evelyn studies her daughter's face, the fear and shame tangled behind her eyes. "I never wanted the world to hate you," Evelyn whispers. "I only wanted my children to remember me with kindness." The ache in her voice is heavier than any public judgment. Frank steps closer, his posture protective but gentle. "The video isn't just about hate," he says quietly. "A lot of people are defending you, saying you deserved better, saying what happened to you is happening to their parents too." For the first time, the weight of this isn't just personal, it's bigger, a shared wound in the culture around them. Have you ever seen one private moment reveal a truth that belongs to thousands? There's a knock at the door, firm but polite. A woman in her 40s steps in, wearing a badge that reads, "Medical Social Worker, Amy Harris." Her expression is calm but serious. The kind of calm that means someone is here to address what everyone else has tried to avoid. "Mrs. Walker," she says gently. "I'm Amy. I'd like to talk with you about your situation, if that's all right." Melissa straightens defensively. "Is this about that video? It's exaggerated. People online overreact." Amy's eyes remain steady. "It's about your mother's safety, her rights, and her wishes," she replies. "We received multiple calls and messages about her tonight. So yes, this is about the video, but it's also about much more than that." Daniel and Jenna exchange a nervous glance. Justice, it seems, has arrived in scrubs and a calm voice. Amy pulls a chair beside Evelyn's bed and sits so their eyes are level. "Evelyn," she says softly, "I've seen the video. I've also read your chart. What I need to know now is simple. Do you feel pressured to leave your home against your will?" Evelyn inhales shakily, her fingers tightening around Frank's hand. For once, no one answers for her. "Yes," she whispers. "I do." The monitor beeps faster for a moment, then steadies. She swallows. "They're scared, I know, but they talk about me like I'm already gone. Like I don't get a say in my own life." Amy nods slowly, her tone steady but compassionate. "Thank you for telling me the truth. Legally, as long as you're mentally capable of making your own decisions, and so far everything suggests you are, no one can force you into a facility. Not your children. Not anyone." The words land like a lifeline, simple and solid. Evelyn's eyes fill with tears, not from pain but from relief. Melissa sputters, "She almost died tonight. How can you say she's capable?" Amy turns to her. "Needing medical care is not the same as losing your rights," she replies firmly. "And the way you speak about her even here concerns me." Jenna winces. Daniel looks like he might be sick. Justice is uncomfortable when it forces you to look in a mirror. Amy turns back to Evelyn. "We can explore options," she continues. "Home care support, community resources, volunteer companions. You don't have to choose between being alone and being locked away." She glances toward Frank. "And it seems you've already found someone willing to be in your corner." Frank clears his throat, surprised to suddenly be part of the conversation. I live alone," he says quietly. "My kids are grown. My wife passed 5 years ago. I come to Romano's every Friday after visiting her grave. That's where I met your mother, in a way, long before I knew her name." He smiles softly at Evelyn. "I can help. Rides, groceries, fixing things around the house, sitting and listening. Whatever she'll let me do." Daniel looks at him with a mix of gratitude and jealousy. Gratitude that his mother isn't alone. Jealousy that a stranger has done more in one night than he has in years. "I want to help too," Daniel blurts out. "We can make a schedule. I can fly home once a month, stay longer, work remote more often." His voice trembles, but the intention is real. Jenna nods quickly, wiping her eyes. "I can come over during the week," she says. "Help with laundry, meals, whatever. I can bring the grandkids. We can actually visit instead of just sending photos." She turns to Evelyn, desperate. "If you'll still let us." Melissa stands apart, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You're all acting like this fixes everything," she says coldly. "It doesn't change the fact she's weak, that she gave away her money, that she can't keep up with the house." There's fear beneath her words, but also something sharper, loss of control. Amy studies her carefully. "Melissa, is there something else going on?" she asks. "Something you haven't said yet?" For a moment, Melissa doesn't answer. Her eyes glisten, but she refuses to blink. Finally, the dam cracks. "My firm is downsizing," she says in a flat voice. "I'm on the short list to be partner, or to be cut. HR already flagged me for family distractions after Dad died and Mom needed more help." Her lips tremble. "If something happens to her alone in that house, they'll say I failed. Again. And I can't lose everything I've worked for." Evelyn looks at her daughter with a heartbreaking tenderness. "Oh, Melissa," she murmurs. "You thought you had to choose between me and your life." Her eyes soften. "I never wanted that for you. Have you ever hurt someone trying to protect yourself from a fear you never said out loud?" Tears finally spill down Melissa's cheeks, uncontrolled. "I was angry," she chokes. "But I wasn't just angry at you. I was angry at Dad for dying, at my brothers for living far away, at myself for not being enough." She presses a trembling hand to her forehead. "Calling you an embarrassment. God, I hate myself for that." Evelyn's voice is soft but steady. "You were wrong," she says simply. "You hurt me. Deeply. That doesn't disappear because you're scared." Melissa flinches. For the first time, she hears consequences, not just comfort. "But," Evelyn continues, surprising everyone, "I know what it's like to do the wrong thing for what feels like the right reason. I gave away too much money. I hid things. I thought I was protecting you. I wasn't." She takes a careful breath. "So here is my decision. My justice." The room leans in, collectively holding its breath. "I will not go to a facility," Evelyn says, her voice gaining strength. "If I leave my home, it will be because I chose it, not because you're afraid or busy or worried about your job." She squeezes Frank's hand. "I will accept help. I will not accept being hidden." Amy nods, a small smile curving her lips. "That's your right," she says, "and we'll document that clearly. No one can override your wishes without a court saying you're incapable, and everything I've heard tonight says you're very capable." Daniel exhales shakily, as if he's been holding his breath for years. "Then we start over," he says. "We learn how to be there for you, really there." Jenna nods vigorously, tears shining. "We choose you, Mom. Not our convenience this time." Melissa looks between them. Her mother, her siblings, Frank, the social worker, the blinking monitor, and Daniel's phone still lit with strangers' judgment. She feels the walls of her old reality closing in, demanding a choice. Slowly, with visible effort, she steps closer to the bed. "Mom," she whispers, voice raw, "I want to try too. I don't know how to fix everything, but I want to try." Evelyn studies her long and hard, searching for truth in her eyes. Then, finally, she nods. "You can try," she says, "but I won't let you speak about me the way you did ever again. Not to my face, not behind my back, not in front of strangers. I won't carry your shame for simply existing." The quiet strength in her tone is a justice of its own. Amy smiles faintly. "That's what boundaries look like," she says. "They're not punishment, they're protection." She closes her notebook. "I'll work with the team to arrange resources. But tonight, She looks at Evelyn with genuine respect. Tonight you've already done the hardest part yourself. The room grows still again, but this time it's a different kind of silence, one full of possibility, not just pain. Evelyn leans back against her pillow, exhausted but grounded in her own choice. The first threads of justice have been woven, the truth named, the harm acknowledged, the future claimed. Just as everyone begins to exhale, Amy's pager buzzes sharply at her hip. At the same moment, Daniel's phone lights up with an incoming call from an unknown number. He frowns and answers, expecting a wrong number or a scam. "Hello?" A firm voice responds on the other end. "Is this Daniel Walker, son of Evelyn Walker from the viral restaurant video?" Daniel's stomach drops. "Who is this?" he asks. There's a brief pause, then, "My name is Mark Feldman. I'm an attorney specializing in elder abuse cases, and I think your mother might need my help." And as Daniel's eyes dart to his mother's bed, to his sisters, to Frank, to the social worker still standing there, he realizes the real storm may only just be beginning. Daniel freezes with the phone pressed to his ear, the attorney's words pulsing through him like electricity. Elder abuse cases, his mother, his family, the video. Every regret and every mistake from that night collapses into a single point inside his chest. Shame sharper than pain. We don't need a lawyer," he stammers weakly, glancing at his mother's tired face. "We are handling it." But even he hears the lie in his voice. On the other end of the line, attorney Mark Feldman speaks calmly, too calmly. "I've already been contacted by 3 different people who saw the video," he says. "Strangers concerned for your mother's welfare. If I don't represent her, someone else will. Adult Protective Services has also been alerted." The words make Daniel's knees soften. APS. Investigation. Report. Evelyn's life, once quiet, private, now dissected by the world. Evelyn watches her son's face pale as he listens. "Daniel?" she whispers gently. "What's happening?" Frank steps closer, sensing the shift in the room. Jenna clutches the bed railing, eyes filling with fear again. Melissa stands rigid, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles are bone white. She's braced for impact, one she fears she deserves. Daniel lowers the phone slowly, swallowing hard. "Mom, I don't think this ends with just us apologizing," he says quietly. "People reported us. An attorney says he wants to help you. APS might get involved." Evelyn's breath trembles. "All because of that video?" she asks. Jenna shakes her head. "Because of how we treated you," she murmurs, her voice small. Melissa steps forward suddenly, shaking her head. "No, absolutely not. We are not letting a stranger dictate our family. We can handle this without legal intervention." But even as she speaks, her voice cracks. Every person in the room sees the truth she's trying and failing to conceal. Fear of losing control, fear of being judged, fear of consequences that stretch beyond apologies and promises. Amy, the social worker, clears her throat softly. "Melissa," she says, tone measured, "sometimes legal involvement isn't punishment. It's protection. Protection of your mother's rights, her autonomy, and her dignity." Melissa's eyes glisten with anger and hurt. "I'm not trying to hurt her," she snaps. "I'm trying to protect her." Evelyn reaches toward her slowly, her hand trembling. "Melissa," she whispers, "sit with me." Something in her mother's soft voice pulls Melissa forward despite herself. She sinks into the chair beside the bed, tears finally spilling over. Evelyn brushes her daughter's cheek with the back of her hand. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she murmurs, "and you don't get to carry me like a burden." Even with the words so gentle, Melissa flinches. "I know," she breathes. "I know I didn't see how much I was hurting you." Evelyn nods faintly. "But you're seeing me now. If this moment touches you, ask yourself, when was the last time you truly saw the people you love, not for their roles, but for their hearts?" The doctor enters then, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Walker," he says, "your condition is stable enough for a transfer to a private recovery room." He glances at her children. "You can accompany her, but only one at a time for extended visits. We'll need to maintain low stress. His eyes linger subtly on Melissa, who looks down, chastened. Frank helps adjust Evelyn's blanket as orderlies prepare her new room. Evelyn turns to him. "Thank you," she whispers, "for staying, for speaking up, for being kind." Frank squeezes her hand, his voice thick with emotion. "You deserved someone in your corner," he says. "I just happened to be there when you needed one." In that moment, something gentle and hopeful forms between them. Not love yet, but a bond strong enough to matter. As Evelyn is wheeled down the hallway, cameras flash suddenly. A couple of people have recognized her from the viral video. One whispers, "That's her, the grandmother from the restaurant." Another murmurs, "Poor woman. I hope she's okay." Daniel steps in front of Evelyn instinctively, blocking the cameras, shame burning in his chest. Jenna grabs her mother's hand tightly. Melissa stiffens, swallowing the reality of public judgment. In the recovery room, Evelyn finally settles against crisp white sheets, eyes fluttering with exhaustion. Daniel takes the first shift sitting with her, holding her hand as he whispers, "I promise, I'll make this right." Jenna embraces her mother gently before stepping out for air. Melissa lingers at the foot of the bed, torn between leaving and reaching out again. Amy returns a moment later, holding a stack of brochures and papers. "We'll need to complete some assessments," she says to Evelyn. "Your mental capacity, your support system, your preferences for continued care." She softens. "You're in control now, Evelyn." Evelyn nods with gratitude. Then Amy turns to the siblings. "And I'll need to interview each of you privately." Melissa's pulse spikes. Daniel nods. Jenna looks terrified. Reconciliation has begun, but accountability isn't optional. An hour passes. Daniel's interview is gentle. He admits fault, expresses genuine remorse. Jenna's is emotional. She breaks down halfway through, confessing her guilt, her avoidance, her regrets. But Melissa's interview is different. Voices rise. Melissa's tone sharpens. Amy's becomes firmer. A few words leak through the cracked door. "You pressured her. You weren't listening. You escalated things. This isn't about your job title." Melissa emerges with red eyes and shaking hands. Later, as the siblings gather near the nurse's station, Amy approaches with a form in hand. "I've spoken with everyone," she says carefully. "And while Mrs. Walker is fully capable of making her own decisions, there will still be a follow-up from Adult Protective Services. That's standard in cases like this." Jenna nods immediately. Daniel too. But Melissa's face hardens again. "So what does that mean?" she demands. "It means," Amy says gently, "someone will come to the house. They'll speak with your mother. They'll speak with all of you. They'll evaluate her well-being, living conditions, emotional environment." She looks directly at Melissa. "They will determine whether her autonomy is being respected or threatened." Melissa nearly falters. Daniel reaches for her elbow, but she pulls away. Then Amy looks at Evelyn. "You have the right," she says softly, "to designate who you want present for your APS interview. And you have the right to name an advocate." Evelyn considers her children. 3 people she gave her life to, who failed her in different ways. And then she looks at Frank. "I want Frank," she says quietly. Melissa stares at her mother as though struck. The decision isn't cruel. It's truth. That night, back at Evelyn's house, an unexpected tension settles among the siblings as they look around the quiet rooms she once lived in alone. Daniel sees the fading paint on the porch. Jenna notices the worn rug near the kitchen. Melissa sees the unopened mail, the empty living room, the single coffee mug by the sink. Each of them witnesses, in a new way, all the places their mother's loneliness hid. "We should fix the house," Daniel says. "We should take turns cleaning, visiting, staying over," Jenna adds. Melissa whispers, "I'll talk to my firm. Try to work remote more." The first true plan they've made with their mother in years. But just as the siblings begin taking steps toward reconciliation, a sudden knock rattles Evelyn's front door. It's late. Too late for visitors. Daniel opens it cautiously, and standing on the porch is attorney Mark Feldman himself, briefcase in hand, expression unreadable. "I tried calling," he says calmly, "but this couldn't wait." Melissa stiffens. "We don't need your services. We've got things under control." He steps inside anyway, offering a business card. "Actually, this isn't about whether you need me." He turns to Evelyn, who sits in her armchair, blanket across her lap, Frank by her side. "It's about whose side I'm already on." He hands Evelyn a document, one already signed by someone she never expected. Evelyn reads it slowly. Her eyes widen, her breath catches, her hand shakes. The paper falls to the floor, because it contains a name she hasn't seen in years. Someone who was supposed to be gone forever. Someone who, according to this document, has just filed for legal guardianship over her. And it isn't any of her children. Evelyn stared at the guardianship document on the floor, her breath trembling in her chest. The room fell silent, every heartbeat loud in the quiet house. Frank knelt to pick up the paper and handed it gently back to her, his voice calm and steady. "Take your time," he said. "You don't have to rush this." Her children stood frozen, Daniel with his hands clenched at his sides, Jenna with tears ready to fall, and Melissa pale as chalk. None of them understood what they were seeing. None of them had expected another name to appear. But there it was, printed clearly on the line for petitioner, Michael Walker, Evelyn's brother, the same brother who left Ohio 40 years ago and rarely looked back. Daniel spoke first, voice cautious. "Mom, I thought Uncle Michael hadn't contacted you in decades." Evelyn held the paper gently, as if afraid it might burn her. "He hasn't," she whispered. "Not since after Henry died. He couldn't handle grief. Not his, not mine. He ran from it." She exhaled shakily. "But I never expected him to return like this." Attorney Feldman cleared his throat softly. "Your brother contacted my office this afternoon," he explained. "He's been living in Arizona, but someone sent him the video. He called me immediately and asked about your situation." He adjusted his glasses. "He said he wasn't sure your children were acting in your best interest." The siblings bristled at that, but guilt kept them from protesting too loudly. Jenna stepped forward tentatively. "Mom, do you want him involved?" she asked, fear and hope tangled in her voice. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, letting the question settle. 40 years of silence weighed heavily on her shoulders. When she opened her eyes again, they were clear, calm. "No," she said gently. "I don't want a guardian. Not him, not anyone." She handed the paper back to Feldman. "I want my independence, and I want help I can choose, not help forced on me." Feldman nodded respectfully. "That is your right. If you wish, I can file an immediate objection and formally request the petition be dismissed." His voice softened. "But I have to ask, do you want me to stay on as your attorney?" The question hung in the air like a test of her newfound strength. Evelyn looked at Frank, then at her children. "No," she said with surprising confidence. "I don't need a lawyer to defend me against my own family. Not anymore." She offered a small, kind smile. "I found my voice again, and they're learning to hear me." Melissa stepped forward then, her eyes rimmed with red. "Mom, I'm so sorry." The words were fragile but honest. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to handle everything. I didn't know how to show I was scared without becoming hard." Evelyn extended her hand. Melissa took it slowly, as if afraid it might vanish. "Fear makes us do foolish things," Evelyn whispered. "But love is stronger, and I do love you, Melissa. That's why I'm telling you the truth, even when it hurts." Daniel moved closer too, voice cracking. "I should have been around more. I should have cared before it reached this point." He knelt beside her chair. "Mom, I'm here now. I'm not leaving again." She touched his cheek gently, the kind of touch that said everything without words. Jenna wrapped her arms around her mother from the other side, her tears warm against Evelyn's hospital gown. "We'll do better," she whispered. "All of us, not out of obligation, out of love." Evelyn stroked her hair softly. "That's all I ever wanted," she whispered. Feldman stepped back, watching the scene with the quiet understanding of someone who'd seen too many families fall apart, and too few stitch themselves back together. "I'll handle the paperwork," he said softly. "Just say the word." Evelyn nodded gratefully, and he let himself out, leaving the family to mend what remained. For the first time in months, maybe years, the Walker home felt warm, tender, real. The house wasn't filled with apologies alone. It was filled with intention. Daniel fixed the wobbly dining chair. Jenna washed the old coffee mug by the sink. Melissa organized paperwork at the kitchen table, her posture less rigid, her heart more open. Frank remained beside Evelyn, helping her settle into her favorite armchair by the window. She studied him quietly, something gentle blossoming in her expression. "Thank you," she said, "not just for tonight, for seeing me when I felt invisible." Frank smiled, his eyes softening. Some people are impossible not to see. They sat together, watching the sun rise through the curtains, a soft golden light warming the worn wooden floor. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something deeper, slower, a companionship built from courage and timing and a simple truth. Two lonely souls had found each other in a place neither expected. Over the next few days, support formed naturally around Evelyn. Jenna organized weekly visits. Daniel set up automatic bill payments and hired a gardener. Melissa arranged for a part-time home care aide, Evelyn's choice, and adjusted her work schedule to work from home twice a week. They didn't act from guilt anymore. They acted from love. The APS visit came and went smoothly. The investigator walked through the home, spoke with Evelyn privately, and reviewed her medical evaluations. By the time she left, her smile was warm and assured. "You're in good hands," she told Evelyn, "and in control." Weeks later, Evelyn returned to Romano's for the first time since that night. The staff greeted her like an old friend. Maddie, the teen who recorded everything, ran up to hug her, relief flooding her face. "You're okay," she said. "I was so worried." Evelyn hugged her back. "Thank you," she whispered. "You were brave." Frank joined her at their table, 2 steaming cups of coffee placed gently between them. Evelyn looked around the restaurant, the place where everything fell apart, and somehow everything began again. She breathed in the familiar smell of tomato sauce and garlic, and smiled. "Funny," she said softly. "My worst night happened right here." Frank nodded. "And your best days might start here, too." Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. "I think they already have."